freedom. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different. But if there's a common denominator in happiness, a universal fuel of joy, it's that people want to control their lives. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Angus Campbell was a psychologist at the University of Michigan. Born in 1910, his research took place during an age when psychology was overwhelmingly focused on disorders that brought people down, things like depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. Campbell wanted to know what made people happy. His 1981 book, The Sense of Well-Being in America, starts by pointing out that people are generally happier than many psychologists assumed. But some were clearly doing better than others. And you couldn't necessarily group them by income, geography, or education, because so many in each of those categories end up chronically unhappy. The most powerful common denominator of happiness was simple. Campbell summed it up. Having a strong sense of controlling one's life is more important than your salary, more than the size of your house, and more than the prestige of your job. It is a lifestyle variable that makes people happy. Money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. To obtain, bit by bit, a level of independence and autonomy that comes from unspent assets gives you greater control over what you can do and when you can do it. A small amount of wealth means the ability to take a few days off work when you're sick without breaking the bank. Gaining that ability is huge if you don't have it. A bit more means waiting for a good job to come around after you get laid off, rather than having to take the first one you find. That can be life-changing. 6 months of emergency expenses means not being terrified of your boss, because you know you won't be ruined if you have to take some time off to find a new job. More still means the ability to take a job with lower pay but flexible hours, maybe one with a shorter commute, or being able to deal with a medical emergency without the added burden of worrying about how you'll pay for it. Few luxury goods can compete with that benefit. Throughout college, I wanted to be an investment banker. There was only one reason why: they made a lot of money. Once I got it, I scored a summer internship at an investment bank in Los Angeles. On my first day, I realized why investment bankers make a lot of money. They work longer and more controlled hours than I knew humans could handle. Actually, most can't handle it. Going home before midnight was considered a luxury. And there was a saying in the office, "You don't come to work on Saturdays, don't bother back on Sunday." The job was intellectually stimulating and important, but every waking second of my junior year, I thought I won the career I ever wanted. Well, it made me become like my boss's comments, which was enough to ruin one of the most miserable experiences of my life. I lasted a month. The hardest thing about this was that I loved the work, and I wanted to work hard. But doing something you love on a schedule you can't control can feel the same as doing something you hate. There is a name for this feeling. Psychologists call it e-octane. Jana Berger, a meeting professor at the University of Pennsylvania, summed it up well. People in the training room, when we get them to do something, they feel empowered. Rather than feeling they had the choice, they feel like we made it for them. So they say to go or do something like that. I had a day job in Midtown Manhattan paying $30,000 per year, about minimum wage. I never ate out and never took a taxi. My cost of living was about $2,000/month, and I was earning $1,800 month. I was 22 years old. Once I had $20,000, I could quit my job and become a full-time musician. I knew I could get a few gigs per month to pay my cost of living. So I was free. I never had a job again. Did you sell your company? I said no. That didn't make a big difference in my life. That was just more money in the bank. The difference happened when I was 22nd. The United States is the richest nation in the history of the world. But there is little evidence that its citizens are, on average, happier today than they were in the 1970s, when wealth and income were much lower, even at the median level and adjusted for inflation. A 2019 Gallup poll of 150,000 people in 40 countries found that about 44% of the global average was 39%. 55% of Americans said they felt a lot of stress the previous day. For the rest of the world, 35% said the same. Part of what's happened here is that we've used our greater wealth to buy bigger and better stuff. But we've simultaneously given up more control over our time. At best, those things cancel each other out. In 1955, the median income was just over $52. The new American home now has more bathrooms than occupants. Our cars are faster and more efficient. Our TVs are cheaper and sharper. What's happened to our time, on the other hand, barely looks like progress. And a lot of the reason has to do with the kind of jobs more of us now have. John D. Rockefeller was one of the most successful businessmen of all time. He was also a recluse, spending most of his time by himself. He rarely spoke, deliberately making himself inaccessible and staying quiet when you caught his attention. A refinery worker who occasionally had Rockefeller's car once remarked, "He lets everybody else talk, while he sits back and says nothing." When asked about his silence during meetings, Rockefeller often recited a poem. A wise old owl lived in an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we all like that wise old bird? Rockefeller was a strange guy, but he figured out something that now applies to tens of millions of workers. Rockefeller's job wasn't to drill wells, load trains, or move barrels. It was to think and make good decisions. Rockefeller's product, his deliverable, wasn't what he did with his hands or even his words. It was what he figured out inside his head. So that's where he spent most of his time and energy. Despite sitting quietly most of the day, in what might have looked like free time or leisure hours to most people, he was constantly working in his mind, thinking problems through. This was unique in his day. Almost all jobs during Rockefeller's time required doing things with your hands. 87% were in agriculture, and 35% were in crafts or manufacturing, according to economist Robert Gordon. Few professions relied on a worker's brain. Interruption, and your work was visible and tangible. Today, that's flipped, much as your actions. Managers, more of us, have jobs that look closer to Rockefeller than a typical 1950s manufacturing worker, which means our days don't end when we clock out and leave the factory. We're constantly working in our heads, which means it feels like work never ends. If your job is to build cars, there is little you can do when you're not on the assembly line. You detach from work and leave your tools in the factory. But if your job is to create a marketing campaign, a thought-based and decision-making job, your tool is your head, which never leaves you. You might be thinking about your project during your commute, as you're making dinner, while you put your kids to sleep, and when you wake up stressed at 3 in the morning. You might be on the clock for fewer hours than you would in a regular job. But it feels like you're working 24/7 if the operating equipment of the 21st century is a portable device. This means the modern factory is not a place at all. It is the day itself. The computer age has liberated the tools of productivity from the office. Most knowledge workers whose laptops and smartphones are portable all-purpose meat-making machines can theoretically be as productive at 2 p.m. in the main office as at 2 amperes in a Tokyo WeWork or at midnight on the couch. Compared to generations prior, control over your time has diminished. And since controlling your time is such a key happiness influencer, we shouldn't be surprised that people don't feel much happier, even though we are, on average, richer than ever. What do we do about that? It's not an easy problem to solve, because everyone's different. The first step is merely acknowledging what does and does not make almost everyone happy. In his book, 30 Lessons for Living, gerontologist Carl Pillemer interviewed 1,000 elderly Americans looking for the most important lessons they learned from decades of life experience. He wrote, "No one, not a single person out of 1,000, said that to be happy, you should try to work as hard as you can to make money to buy the things you want. No one, not a single person, said it's important to be at least as wealthy as the people around you, and if you have more than they do, it's real success. No one, not a single person, said you should choose your work based on your desired future earning power. What they did value were things like quality friendships, being part of something bigger than themselves, and spending quality, unstructured time with their children. Your kids don't want your money or what your money buys anywhere near as much as they want you. Specifically, they want you with them," Pillemer writes. Take it from those who have lived through everything. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays.